Hello, and welcome to the TerraLex Insights podcast, where our goal is to present multicultural perspectives by leading professionals. These perspectives on contemporary issues will help lawyers and business people work better together. I'm your host, Terry Pepper Gavlik, TerraLex's Chief Business Officer. And today, we're delighted to be speaking with Ignacio Abella, editor of Benchmarking for Latin Lawyer. Hi, Ignacio. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Terry. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Thank you. And today we're going to talk a little bit about getting a close-up view about rankings and benchmarking of law firms, which is, from my day, many years in law firms, a cause of great consternation, but also great pride. But before that, tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be in your current role and what that role entails. I just want to set the stage.
Right. I have spent quite a while doing working at legal publishers. And I started at Chambers and Partners, which I'm sure you're familiar with. In 2004, I spent over 10 years at Chambers and working through different roles, which allow me to understand different markets and law firms and the way they interact with their clients and with the legal directories. I left Chambers and joined a Madrid-based magazine, also in the legal market. And I developed a Latin American publication for them, i.e. a publication focusing on the legal market in Latin America. Then, 2 years ago, there was this opportunity to join Latin Lawyer, which is my current role. I joined in 2018 as deputy editor for benchmarking. And my task was to expand the benchmarking guides at Latin Lawyer. I was successful in launching a guide, and I moved into the role of editor, taking over all the benchmarking side of Latin Lawyer. Latin Lawyer has two main sides. One that is the content, news, magazine, website, and so on. And close to that is the benchmarking side, which includes the Latin Lawyer 250, which is our flagship publication. Then includes Latin Lawyer National, which is the publication I launched 2 years ago. I launched 1 year ago. I joined 2 years ago. And we also have other benchmarking guides, such as LACA Proof, which is powered by the vote of the in-house counsel in Latin America, and which are members of the Latin American Corporate Counsel Association, which is affiliated to Latin Lawyer.
So for our listeners that maybe aren't familiar, although if they're law firms or clients, I'm sure they are, but for any listeners that may not be familiar with what rankings and benchmarking are all about in the legal industry, I know from my perspective, they've been helpful. They're helpful for clients to either make or confirm decisions of outside lawyers that they might work with. And it's also helpful for the law firms themselves when they're recruiting, because a potential new partner or associate or someone wanting to join the firm is going to look and see how the firm stacks up. And certainly every of these ranking publications has different criteria and different things that they're looking at. So for the publications and the rankings that you're working with now, what are some of the things that you're looking at? And maybe even tell us at the same time, what are some of the things that are out of the control of a law firm when they're thinking about being ranked?
I am of the opinion, perhaps a bit biased, that benchmarking and legal directors, provide a bit of transparency to the legal market. And the idea is that they guide in-house counsel when making their choices. I understand from my conversation with in-house counsel that they do take into account what has been said by a particular benchmarking guide or a particular directory when making a decision regarding which law firm to hire, which lawyer to hire. And they apply different weight to this opinion of the directory, based sometimes in jurisdiction, sometimes in practice areas, and so on. So it's a helpful tool. It's not the definite tool, but it's a very helpful tool. In the case of Latin Lawyer, for the benchmarking, we take into account several criteria, including obviously feedback from clients, We review the client list, we review transactions, and our news site helps with that. We also review general commentary in the market, and the idea behind our benchmarking guides is to help multinational clients make a decision when it comes to reaching out to law firms in Latin America. This is something that obviously fits into what our decision-making process regarding the selection of law firms for the benchmarking guides. These law firms have to be the top of the market. They have to be sizable enough to handle large transactions for large multinationals or for large local corporations. In this from this slide, yes, size does matter.
Mm-hmm.
We also take into account the nature of the transaction that these law firms take on board, and also, as I said earlier, the feedback from corporate counsel. That is actually quite critical, and it helps us and other benchmarking guides identify the top law firms.
So what are some of the things that maybe are out of control of law firms who can't understand perhaps why they're not ranked? I've seen that all over the world, not, specifically with Latin Lawyer, but we have outstanding law firms in their particular jurisdiction in our network, for example, but some of them, there are factors that would keep them from being ranked, whether that's newness or confidentiality of their work or things like that. What are some of those kinds of factors that a firm can't fight, so they have to accept?
Some of them is some of these factors they cannot decide on is basically the amount of feedback that the benchmarking guide will review. They need to understand that we will talk to everyone in the market and we will make a decision based on that. Also, the fact that the nature of the work is very confidential. It will be slightly difficult for the directory to make a decision if there's no work to review. And also, certain practice areas are not covered by all the directories. So if a law firm is specialized in a given market or a given practice area, they might not have a chance because the directory doesn't cover that area in that country or in that market. You mentioned newness of a law firm. Law firms are actually relatively young, but when they apply, we take into consideration the experience shown by the partners of the lawyers, i.e., a law firm which just opened in a particular market, specializing in a key practice area. It might look new, but when you speak to the partners, you realize they all come from top law firms in that market. They just decided to maybe launch a boutique, or maybe just have a different setup, or just pursue different opportunities with their clients, or move location. So the fact that law firm launched a year ago will not stop them from being included in one of the benchmarking publications. We normally take time, and we normally give time to these law firms to actually make a mark in their markets and practice areas. But the age, so to speak, of a law firm operations does not prevent them from being included or not.
So I'm glad to hear that, because I know that it's not that way all over the world with various rankings and benchmarking, but it's great that you guys take that view that it's really a law firm is nothing more than the collective experience of the lawyers.
Our new benchmarking guide gives us the opportunity of going deeper into each of the countries and each of the market and learn what these new law firms are doing, and we speak to the clients and we speak to these partners. We have 20 years of experience, or over actually 20 years of experience researching the legal market in Latin America. So we can track the careers and the achievements of these particular lawyers in this particular area. So it's actually quite interesting when you see that a team of lawyers decided to go and launch a new firm and you see them flourish. That's actually very interesting for me particular and for our teams, and to see and just to track it. And maybe in the near future, you see them appear in one of the top benchmarking guides.
Well, that makes total sense. I do a lot of work with firms, or more so in the past, but consulting on their strategy. And if they're leaving large firms and they don't have a strategy that'll immediately start to fill their client database, they probably shouldn't have jumped off and started their own firms anyway. So that's great confirmation of that. On the flip side of that, and maybe I'll ask you this in two different ways, but on the flip side of that, what are things that law firms can do to make sure that they're being noticed and positioned well, and have potential opportunity to be included in a benchmarking? Are there some best practices, and I guess worst practices? Are there ways that law firms sort of shoot themselves in the foot?
I think the first thing is obviously to do their work properly and impress the clients, so the clients can give us feedback about that. But that obviously that is at the core of every team, of every law firm. But when it comes to appearing in the directories or benchmarking guides, I think law firms should also understand that that is a part of the market, and perhaps start having a relationship with these directories, and also understand that the metrics and decision-making process behind each directory is different. And we are here to actually help law firms understand that. So establishing a relationship where we can talk, and we are more than happy to guide each law firm, or in this case, each consultant or marketing person or communications person within a law firm, to understand the process and add also more validation to the process, so they can submit the information in time, which is actually critical. Provide information the way that we will help the researchers understand what the law firm has been up to. And so that is actually quite critical, to complete the submissions on time, to complete the submissions the way each directory requests they are completed, the information that is required, and so on. And also obviously provide an up-to-date list of contacts or referees, so the researchers can speak to hear about the achievements of the law firms from the clients themselves. I think this obviously leads me to the more common errors that law firms do when trying to apply it or to a directory. One of them is the quality of submissions, which is critical. If some law firms actually don't send the right information on time, and they provide out-of-date referees list, which is actually a problem when it comes to reaching out to the clients, and the client's not there at the company anymore. We understand people change companies and so on, but if you send me a list of 20 referees and I can only reach out 5 because everyone else is not there, it means that the law firm did not take time to update that list. And that is something that affects the way the research teams in the directories do their work. Also, when it comes to highlights of the work, you have to make sure that, law firms have to make sure that they are up to date in the time frame that the directory is asking. So if I'm asking you for work conducted between September 2019 and September 2020, please just frame your work highlights on that time period. Unless there is this amazing deal or this massive litigation that started 2 years ago and you're still working on it and you can make public now, but just explain why you're including this work deal which started in 2018. These work highlights are actually quite critical, that you make the point of, as a law firm, explaining why this is a representative of your work. Sometimes you review a submission and there's a lot of information about particular deals, and most of it is not relevant. I think it should be relevant just to highlight why this deal is important, why this deal is representative of your work. And that's key in the sense of you have a limited amount of deals you can put in a submission and a limited amount of space. So if you're preparing a submission, you should be smart about it and say, okay, these 5 or 10 deals or whatever the limit is represent my work this particular year. Why? Not just the technical details of it, but perhaps why this client is important, why this deal is important for the market, the amount of money involved. We understand that sometimes the value of a deal is actually confidential. You can either choose a range and say, this is the range of this deal, or just use the name, the value of the deal and highlight it as confidential. When it comes, that leads me to confidentiality. Some law firms are very reluctant of sending confidential work. We understand that. We also do explain to law firms, like, we are actually very careful with confidential information. And in my experience, all directories that I know are actually very careful with confidential information. So most of the researchers everywhere at the key directors are used to handling confidential information. So I think the process is to be trusted to send confidential information. Also, there are ways of explaining a deal that is confidential. If a law firm represented Marriott in an acquisition of in a merger with someone else, but this is confidential, you can say an international hotel chain. And even you can also reveal the name, but just making sure that you put a note saying, I'm telling you this is Marriott, the client, but please do not use the name Marriott. So the confidential deals, we do review a lot of them, and we're very careful that it never makes it anywhere that is publishable. The flip side of that is that sometimes when you produce a submission, a particular deal is confidential. You can, that deal in 6 months' time, before the publication of the guide, becomes public, and everyone's a winner. So you can actually write back, if you want, to the guide and say, okay, this deal in this particular submission is now publishable, even though we said 6 months ago or 4 months ago that it was confidential. And because it's so big, that this is probably my top deal of the year. And I think most researchers or writers or editors will obviously, guide you to what to do in those cases. So back to my original, from the onset, what I said, I think one of the key things is law firms need to build a good relationship with the directories, because this communication is to be ongoing. Just don't think that you send a submission and that the process stops there until the rankings come out, and then you obviously are happy or unhappy depending on the results. I think both, obviously, the law firms and the director will benefit from having this ongoing conversation throughout the process.
So, it's interesting from the perspective of law firms, and I've worked in law firms for many years and was a consultant, so I've seen this for ad nauseum. The submission process, and most law firms are submitting to multiple pretty complex organizations all at the same time, and there's not a universal form that you fill out, so you have to do it. And some firms, it becomes someone's full-time or three-quarter time job just to manage it. But I've seen that in a lot of law firms, that person is a clerical level person who may not be involved in firm strategy, and so they miss this whole strategic perspective on it. And I would be remiss if I didn't note that there are consultants in the market that do work with law firms on this. But I have to ask a question, because that comes down to how many do law firms submit for and what's worthwhile. And I'm going to carve out your publication and say we're not going to include that in this answer, because we know that you're not doing this. And we know that most of the big, more reputable publications and rankings are not. But there are a lot of publications out there that are what we call pay for play. And law firms tend to get listed if they also advertise. And so they have to decide which ones are worth it. Speaking from your perspective of 25 plus years in the rankings industry, are those pay-for-play publications something that law firms should pay equal attention to, or do clients not view them as seriously as they might Latin Lawyer or Chambers or some of the others?
With the fact that I've worked at directories for perhaps 16 years now, my view.
Don't let me do the math. I said 25. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. So I didn't pay attention to that. No. I did. I'm not highlighting that. I'm just highlighting that the directors I work with are not paid to play,
right.
and the ones that I know that I'm familiar with, the leading ones, the ones that clients trust, are not paid to play. And this is actually something that is quite critical, because law firms need to decide, and I think they need to see if they're getting this ranking because they're paying, or they're getting this ranking or this inclusion or this award because they are actually that good. And looking at where the peers are also gives an idea. I am of the feeling that if you pay for it, there's no point.
Yeah.
And I think the majority of the directories that clients trust and are not pay to play.
Right.
It's actually quite, and I know there's a lot of rankings and awards in the market, and law firms obviously complain about not knowing which are the legitimate ones. And I know that. And this is actually quite difficult, because one of the questions we do get asked is, how much do I need to pay to be included in Latin Lawyer, for example, or in Chambers? And sometimes they're taken aback by the facts like, sorry, it doesn't cost anything. So because we take the view that that we need to do the research, we need to do the work, and we are not paid to play. That's the policy, and that's the policy at Latin Lawyer and all the our parent companies' publications, and also at Legal 500 and Chambers and other directories that you might be familiar with, that they don't do that. It's definitely not pay to play for the rankings or benchmarking or inclusion, or for the awards as well. The awards are decided obviously based on the research. So I know it's actually quite difficult, but I think law firms are larger law firms. Have enough experience now to be able to sort of decide, or hire an expert that can help them make a decision, or just try and speak to their peers in the market, and you see where are the peers, what they're doing. Do you think I am including this firm in this publication because I pay for? And you'll see it, because it's quite public. You see they have, I don't know, 100 law firms, and they all have advertising. That's quite a rate, isn't it?
A little suspicious, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even this is funny. I think some of my colleagues actually do receive emails saying like, you've been recommended as a top lawyer in M&A or in this particular jurisdiction. This award will be yours if you pay this amount. And that for me is actually hilarious, because I'm not a lawyer.
I get those too, and I laugh.
I imagine that, which is this is how, unfortunately, where things are happening in the market. But I think law firms have to be careful and speak to to some of the players, speak to the peers, speak to the clients, because I think if the clients are reading any particular magazine or any particular directory, they will help them decide. That will definitely help them decide. It's like where I need to be. If my clients are reading Chambers, I need to be in Chambers. If my clients are reading Latin Lawyer, I need to be in Latin Lawyer. If my clients base all their decisions on the Legal 500, that's where I need to make an effort. And when you speak to the Legal 500, to Chambers, to Latin Lawyer, they will say the same thing.
Yeah.
No, this is not pay to play. So
Well, and I have to put a caveat on that though, because I have an opportunity often to lead client panels, and you'll have, you know, a panel of 4 in-house counsel, for example, and 3 of them will admit that they do look at Chambers or Legal 500 or Latin Lawyer or wherever for decisions, but there'll be the one that says, I never look at the rankings. And then what happens is someone in the firm says, well, the rankings are no good because one client didn't look at
yeah,
it. So you have to kind of look across your client base and see what's of value across the base and not just one person's opinion.
exactly. Absolutely. I completely agree. And I do get the feeling, I mean, there's a lot of anecdotes about those conversations with clients that it comes to a point that, I mean, I've heard from general counsel say, I don't tell my law firm where I chose them because it's very difficult, but I do, I never, perhaps because obviously I've always come with the business card of a directory. I have never spoken to a client who has said, actually, I don't use directories. But I have spoken to clients that don't want to say, I use X directory, just not to make the law firm bias. And the majority of them, in my experience, use more than one
Yeah,
directory
exactly.
and more than one tool to make a decision. I think benchmarking publications could be fooling themselves if they think that in-house clients make the decision based on the rankings. Now, the rankings are one tool that helps transparency, that adds transparency to the market, and that helps a decision by an in-house counsel. It's not the sole
Exactly.
tool that they
Helps to
use.
confirm the decision, and you're noticeable by your absence in the leading publication. So it is
Absolutely.
worth it for our law firm listeners to be sure that they do have a good strategy in place. So let's wrap this up by talking about that client input and client feedback that you hear. And I don't mean about a particular firm, but are there themes, and especially maybe even this year, are there themes that you're hearing about things that law firms do well or things that law firms do poorly that might be good advice or a better way to connect lawyers and their clients?
One recurring theme, and that has been obviously very much in the spotlight recently, is the clients complain that the law firms don't talk to them enough, don't keep them updated. And conversely, you see clients raving about this particular lawyer or this particular law firm, which gives them weekly updates or monthly updates of whatever time it takes, not only on where the matter is, but also on the spend. And that helps clients understand what's going on and how much money and where it's being spent. So communication with the clients, I think most of the clients actually are very appreciate a lot when law firms keep them updated. And no matters, not only when working on a deal, even on matters that might be of interest. I'm not saying that just to bombard the client with newsletters and so on, but be more selective and touch base with your client on regular basis, even though you're not working on a deal, but you can then open up, and perhaps if you do a deal in the same market segment when another client is, you can say, this is my experience, this is what's happening in this particular country, and this is a country where you showed interest in the past. These sort of communications are actually quite important. And this is something that the clients say, okay, when we speak to clients, it's like, okay, this is law firm is very good. I just wish they would talk to me more frequently.
Excellent
And
advice.
and they will keep me I wish they would keep me updated with everything that's going on in my deal or in the market or in the matter they're handling for me. And as I said, not just the update of the process, but also on the spend. That is actually one of the things that it keeps we hear constantly. And there are other matters that are more particular to given jurisdictions and so on, and to relations and so on. But on the flip side, there's a lot of law firms, or clients who say, I actually feel I'm the only client this law firm has.
You always want to hear
And I
that. That's
know
great.
because this is a sort of relationship that a law firm has built with that client. And that's actually quite a nice thing to say, because the law firm, if you look at the size of the law firms, obviously you understand that this is definitely not the only client they have. But to make you feel that special is actually, you realize that the law firm is doing their job well.
Excellent advice. So talk to your clients, and that doesn't mean email them to death. It also means picking up the phone sometimes. Right now, you can't maybe have face-to-face visits, but Zoom works. Yeah, we've heard that as well from the client community that interacts with TerraLex. So, well, we thank you so much for your comments today. Very insightful, and I think this is something that our listeners will be very interested to hear, because certainly every law firm I know struggles with how to figure out their strategy for rankings, and this gave them some great insights. Any parting shots, any last bit of advice or words of wisdom you want to impart to law firms?
I think this boils down to communications first and developing relationships second, with your clients, with the market, with your peers, and with the directories. Directories are a tool that is here to stay so far, and we do help the law firms and we do help the clients. So I think communication is key, and developing a strong ongoing relationship is actually key.
Thank you so much, Ignacio. We really appreciated having you as a guest on TerraLex Insights podcast. And we look forward to talking to you again. Appreciate your participation.
Thank you very much.